The morning sunlight streamed through my kitchen window, casting long golden rays across the granite countertops where I sat with my steaming cup of coffee and the morning mail. The familiar ritual of sorting through bills and advertisements felt comforting in my quiet suburban home until I opened an envelope that made my blood run cold. Credit card statement. For an account I'd never opened, with charges totaling over $8,000. My hands trembled as I stared at the billing address, my address, and the account holder name, my own. The purchases ranged from expensive electronics to luxury clothing, all made at stores I'd never stepped foot in. The paper felt heavy in my grip as the sweet aroma of my vanilla latte turned bitter in my mouth. Before I share this shocking experience, please show your support with a like and subscribe. Comment your location below. My name is Catherine Parker. I'm 48 years old, and what happened next shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. The ceramic mug clinked against the marble surface as I set it down with shaking hands, my mind racing through possibilities. Identity theft was my first thought, but as I examined the statement more closely, a sickening realization began to form. The familiar hum of our refrigerator seemed unusually loud in the sudden silence of my kitchen. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Henderson from next door starting her car for her morning grocery run, the sound of normalcy continuing while my world tilted off its axis. The statement showed purchases made locally at the mall just 15 minutes from our house, at the Best Buy where my son Marcus had recently gotten his first job. Marcus, my 22-year-old son who still lived at home while attending community college. The same Marcus Parker who'd been asking for money constantly lately, claiming his part-time retail job barely covered his expenses. My stomach dropped as I remembered how he'd had access to all my important documents when he helped me organize my home office last month. The front door slammed shut upstairs, Marcus leaving for his morning classes. The sound echoed through our 2-story colonial home like a gunshot. I pressed my palms against the cool granite, trying to steady myself as I processed what this could mean. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm, despite the October morning chill seeping through the windows. I needed to talk to someone before I confronted Marcus directly. My first call was to my older daughter, Sarah Parker Klein, who worked as a bank manager downtown. At 30, Sarah had always been the responsible one, the voice of reason in our family. When I reached her at work, her professional composure cracked the moment I explained what I'd discovered. "Mom, you need to check your credit report immediately." Sarah's voice carried that familiar tone of protective concern she'd had since she was a teenager looking out for her younger brother. Through the phone, I could hear the busy sounds of the bank behind her. Phones ringing, the soft chatter of customers, the mechanical whir of counting machines. "Don't say anything to Marcus yet. We need to know the full extent of this first." My second call was to Janet Morrison, my closest friend and co-worker at the insurance agency, where we'd both worked for over a decade. Janet had been through her own family financial crisis when her ex-husband had hidden gambling debts, and I trusted her judgment completely. Her familiar laugh lines and graying auburn hair came to mind as I dialed her direct line at the office. "Catherine, honey, slow down." Janet's warm voice filled with concern as I rushed through the details. In the background, I could hear the familiar sounds of our office. The copy machine running, phones buzzing, the soft classical music we played for clients. "I'm coming over on my lunch break. Don't do anything until we can look at this together." The rest of the morning crawled by in agonizing slow motion. I paced through my house, each room feeling like a crime scene as I searched for other signs I might have missed. In the living room, I noticed the new gaming headset Marcus had been using. Expensive looking, still in its packaging just last week when he claimed a friend had given it to him. The leather recliner where he spent most evenings suddenly seemed like evidence. Upstairs in his bedroom, I found more pieces of the puzzle. Designer jeans with tags still attached, hidden in the back of his closet. A new laptop bag that definitely hadn't been there last month. The afternoon sunlight streaming through his bedroom window illuminated dust motes that seemed to dance mockingly in the air as the truth became undeniable. When Sarah arrived during her lunch break, her professional heels clicking against our hardwood entryway, her face was grim. She'd pulled my credit report, and the news was worse than we'd imagined. 3 unauthorized credit cards, a small personal loan, and even an attempt to open a car loan, all using my social security number and personal information. "Mom, this goes back 6 months," Sarah said, settling into our kitchen booth where we'd had so many family conversations over the years. Her dark business suit and pulled-back hair made her look older than her years as she spread out the printed reports. "He's been systematic about this, small purchases at first, then gradually increasing the amounts." Janet arrived shortly after, her familiar perfume and warm embrace providing the comfort I desperately needed. She examined the evidence with the same careful attention she brought to insurance claims at work. Her reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied each document. "The pattern is clear, Catherine," Janet said gently, her hand squeezing mine across the kitchen table. "This isn't impulsive spending. This is calculated fraud, and it's been going on for months." The 3 of us sat in my kitchen as the afternoon shadows grew longer, surrounded by the evidence of my son's betrayal. The same kitchen where I'd made him breakfast every morning before school, where we'd celebrated his graduation, where I'd encouraged him through his struggles with college and work. Now, it felt like a courtroom where I was both judge and victim. The trap I'd missed finally sprang shut. My hands trembled as I reached for the manila folder I'd found, wedged behind Marcus's dresser, while we were searching his room more thoroughly. Inside were printed emails and documents that made my stomach drop even further. "What is it, Catherine?" Janet asked, noticing how my face had gone pale. I spread the papers across Marcus's unmade bed, the same Spider-Man comforter he'd insisted on keeping from high school. "He's been planning this for months. Look at these." Sarah leaned over my shoulder, her breath catching as she read. "Mom, these are tutorials, step-by-step instructions on identity theft. He researched how to do this." The afternoon light filtering through Marcus's bedroom window cast long shadows across the evidence. His room, with its familiar smell of laundry detergent and that cologne he'd started wearing, felt foreign now. The posters on his walls, his collection of baseball trophies from Little League, the framed photo of us at his high school graduation, everything seemed tainted by what we'd discovered. Janet sat heavily on the edge of Marcus's desk chair, the one where he'd done his homework for years. "Catherine, honey, there's something else we need to consider. Where did he get your social security number? Your personal information?" I felt my knees go weak. "He lives here. He's had access to everything. My tax documents, my mail, my personal files. I never thought I needed to hide anything from my own son." Sarah's professional composure cracked slightly as she continued reading through the papers. "Mom, he's been selling some of this stuff online too. Look at these receipts. He bought expensive items with your credit, then resold them for cash." The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. This wasn't a desperate young man making impulsive mistakes. This was calculated, methodical theft from his own mother. I sank onto his bed, surrounded by the evidence of his deception, feeling like I was drowning in my own home. I keep thinking about all the times he asked about my day at work, about my bills, about whether I was worried about money. I whispered. I thought he was being caring, showing interest in my life. But he was gathering information, wasn't he? Janet moved to sit beside me on the bed, her familiar warmth a comfort in the chaos. You couldn't have known, Catherine. No mother expects this from her child. Sarah was still examining the documents with the analytical eye she'd developed in her business career. The worst part is the timeline, Mom. This started right around the time you were helping him with his job applications, remember? When you were letting him use your computer to fill out applications. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Those long evenings at the kitchen table, me offering encouragement while Marcus typed away on my laptop. I'd been so proud of his initiative, so hopeful that he was finally getting his life together. Instead, he'd been using my trust and my computer to research how to steal from me. What am I supposed to do when he comes home from work tonight? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How do I look at him knowing all this? The three of us sat in the growing shadows of Marcus's room, the weight of the discovery settling around us like dust. Downstairs, I could hear the familiar sounds of our house, the refrigerator humming, the old floorboards settling. Normal sounds from a life that no longer felt normal. Sarah folded the papers carefully, her movements precise and controlled. We need to confront him, Mom. Tonight. All of this evidence, it's not going to explain itself away. But what if he denies it? I asked, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew denial would be impossible given what we'd found. Janet squeezed my hand. Then you'll know exactly who your son has become, and you can decide what to do with that information. As we prepared to leave Marcus's room, I noticed something else that made my heart sink even further. On his nightstand, partially hidden under a car magazine, was a notebook. Sarah opened it to reveal pages of my personal information, written in Marcus's familiar handwriting. Not just my social security number, but account numbers, passwords, even the security questions I used for online banking. He's been planning to go even deeper, Sarah said quietly. Mom, I think he was working up to accessing your actual bank accounts. The violation felt complete now. Not only had Marcus stolen from me, but he'd been preparing for an even more devastating theft. The son I'd raised, worried about, sacrificed for, had been systematically planning to destroy me financially. As we walked downstairs together, the familiar creak of the wooden steps sounding ominous now, I realized that Marcus would be home in less than 3 hours. And hidden in the back of his closet, behind those expensive jeans with tags still attached, I'd found something that would change everything about how this confrontation would go. But I hadn't told Sarah and Janet about it yet, because what I'd discovered would prove that Marcus wasn't working alone. I couldn't bring myself to go back into the living room where Sarah and Janet were waiting. Instead, I found myself standing in my own kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles had turned white. The familiar space felt foreign now, contaminated by the knowledge that Marcus had sat at this very table, using my own computer to research how to steal from me. The hidden discovery from his closet burned in my mind. Behind those expensive clothes with their tags still attached, I'd found a small spiral notebook filled with handwriting that wasn't Marcus's. Someone else's neat, careful script had outlined a step-by-step plan for identity theft, complete with websites to visit and specific credit cards to target. At the bottom of the last page, in Marcus's familiar scrawl, he'd written a phone number and a single name that made my stomach drop. Mom! Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face creased with worry. You've been standing here for 10 minutes? What's wrong? I mean, besides everything that's already wrong? I turned to face her, this daughter who had always been my steady one. my responsible one. The contrast between her and Marcus had never felt more stark or more painful. "There's something else," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Something I found that I haven't told you and Janet about yet." Sarah's shoulders sagged slightly, as if she couldn't bear the weight of one more revelation. "What now?" Before I could answer, Janet joined us in the kitchen, carrying the stack of fraudulent applications we'd discovered. She set them on the counter where they seemed to mock me with their official letterheads and forged signatures. "We need to decide how we're going to handle this when Marcus gets home," Janet said, her voice taking on that practical tone she used when she was trying to keep all of us focused. "Do we lay everything out at once, or do we give him a chance to explain?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Explain what? How he accidentally filled out credit card applications using my social security number? How he accidentally bought expensive clothes with cards that accidentally got approved in my name?" "Margaret," Janet said gently, "I know you're angry. You have every right to be angry, but this is still your son." The words hit me wrong, sparking something hot and defensive in my chest. "Don't you think I know that? Don't you think that makes this 1,000 times worse? If some stranger had stolen my identity, I'd call the police and move on with my life. But this is Marcus. This is the baby I stayed up with all night when he had croup. This is the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers." Sarah moved closer to me, her hand hovering near my shoulder, but not quite touching. "Mom, what else did you find? You said there was something you haven't told us." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photo I'd taken of the notebook page. Sarah squinted at the screen, then her face went pale. "This isn't Marcus's handwriting," she said slowly. "No, it isn't." I swiped to the next photo, showing them the phone number and name written in Marcus's familiar script. "But this part is." Janet leaned in to see the screen. "Who is it? Do you recognize the name?" I nodded, feeling sick all over again. "It's his friend from high school, the one who got arrested for check fraud 2 years ago. Marcus swore to me he'd cut ties with him after that." The kitchen fell silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock, each second bringing us closer to Marcus's return from work. I found myself wondering if he even had a job, or if that was just another lie in the elaborate fiction he'd been constructing around his life. "So Marcus has been getting advice?" Sarah said quietly. "This wasn't just a desperate, stupid mistake. This was planned." The truth of that statement settled over me like a weight. This wasn't my son making one terrible decision in a moment of panic. This was deliberate, calculated, and ongoing. The Marcus who had been living in my house, eating meals I cooked, accepting my help and support, had been systematically planning to rob me blind. "I keep thinking about all the times he asked me questions," I said, staring down at the fraudulent applications on my counter. "Innocent questions about when I was born or what my first pet's name was. I thought he was just making conversation, maybe finally showing some interest in family history." Janet shook her head. "He was collecting information for security questions." "And I gave it to him," I said bitterly. "I practically handed him the keys to my entire financial life because I was so happy he was talking to me like a normal son." Sarah pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "What are we going to do when he walks through that door? Because I don't think I can sit at this table and pretend everything is normal while we wait for the right moment to confront him." I looked around my kitchen, at the 3 of us gathered in the aftermath of Marcus's betrayal, and realized that everything familiar about my life had been turned upside down in the space of one afternoon. The son I thought I knew didn't exist. The trust I'd built with him over 25 years had been a lie, but as I stood there, surrounded by evidence of Marcus's crimes. I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway, 40 minutes earlier than Marcus usually got home from work. And through the kitchen window, I could see he wasn't alone. "He's got someone with him," I whispered, backing away from the window. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched two figures approach my front door. Janet moved to get a better look. "I can't see who it is from this angle. Should we hide these papers?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "We're not the ones who did anything wrong here." But even as she spoke, I was already gathering the fraudulent applications into a stack, my hands shaking. 25 years of motherhood had programmed me to protect Marcus, and even now, even knowing what he'd done, some part of me wanted to shield him from consequences. The front door opened with Marcus's familiar key jingle, followed by voices in the entryway. I strained to listen, trying to identify his companion, but the words were muffled. What I could hear was the tone. Urgent, hushed, conspiratorial. "Mom?" Marcus called out. "You home?" I looked at Janet and Sarah, both of them watching me with expressions that mixed sympathy and determination. Neither of them was going to let me pretend this wasn't happening, and maybe that was exactly what I needed. "In the kitchen," I called back, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Footsteps approached, and then Marcus appeared in the doorway. He looked the same as always, my tall, lanky son with his father's dark eyes and perpetually rumpled work clothes. But now, when I looked at him, all I could see was a stranger wearing my child's face. Behind him stood his friend Kevin, the same Kevin whose name and phone number I'd found in Marcus's notebook. Kevin looked nervous, his eyes darting around the kitchen before settling on the papers still partially visible on my counter. "Hey," Marcus said, his smile faltering as he took in the scene. 3 women sitting around his evidence of fraud, all of them staring at him with expressions that could have frozen water. "What's going on? You all look like someone died." "Sit down, Marcus," I said quietly. "Actually, we were just heading upstairs to grab some of my stuff," Marcus said quickly. "Kevin's letting me crash at his place for a few days while his roommate's out of town." The coincidence was too perfect, too convenient. I wondered if Kevin had warned him somehow, if they'd been monitoring my credit reports or bank accounts, waiting for the moment when their scheme would be discovered. "Sit down," I repeated, and this time there was no mistaking the steel in my voice. Marcus hesitated, glancing at Kevin, who was still staring at the papers on my counter like they might bite him. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken accusations and the weight of broken trust. "Look, if this is about the rent money," Marcus started, "I told you I'd have it next week when I get paid." "It's not about rent money," Janet said coldly. Marcus finally seemed to register that this wasn't a normal family gathering. His eyes moved from face to face, and I watched him shift into the mode I now recognized, calculating, defensive, preparing his lies. "Then what's this about?" he asked, but his voice had changed. The easy familiarity was gone, replaced by something harder. I reached for the top paper in my stack, my hand trembling slightly. "This is about you using my social security number to apply for credit cards." The words hung in the air like a physical thing. Marcus went very still, and beside him, Kevin took an actual step backward toward the doorway. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said, but his face had gone pale. "Don't," Sarah said sharply. "Do not stand there and lie to her face when we have the applications right here with your handwriting on them." Kevin cleared his throat. "Maybe we should go, man. This seems like a family thing." But as Kevin turned toward the door, I realized that letting him leave would be the biggest mistake I could make. Whatever was happening here, whatever Marcus had planned by bringing Kevin home today, I was about to find out just how deep this betrayal really went. "Kevin," I said, my voice carrying an authority I didn't know I possessed. "I think you should stay." Kevin froze in the doorway, his shoulders hunching slightly. The way he reacted told me everything I needed to know before he even turned around. This wasn't just Marcus acting alone. "I really should go," Kevin said, not meeting my eyes. "This is between you and Marcus." "No," I said, standing up from my chair. "I don't think it is." Marcus shot a warning look at Kevin, a quick shake of his head that he probably thought I wouldn't notice. But I was seeing everything now with painful clarity. The way Kevin had avoided looking directly at me when they walked in. The way he'd stepped back when I mentioned the credit card applications. The way Marcus had conveniently planned to stay at Kevin's place right when this was all coming to light. "Mom, Kevin doesn't have anything to do with this," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Janet leaned forward in her chair. "Then why does he look like he's about to throw up?" Kevin's face flushed red. "I just don't want to be in the middle of family drama, that's all." "Family drama?" Sarah repeated slowly. "Is that what we're calling identity theft now?" I walked over to the counter and picked up the stack of papers, flipping through them until I found what I was looking for. My hands were steadier now, my initial shock crystallizing into something sharper and more focused. "Kevin," I said, holding up one of the credit applications. "What's your address?" "What?" Kevin's voice cracked slightly. "Your address. Where do you live?" Marcus stepped between us. "Mom, stop. This is ridiculous." But I kept my eyes on Kevin. "Because according to this application for a store credit card, you live here." "At my address. With my social security number. But somehow your name ended up on the paperwork too." The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin's mouth opened and closed like he was trying to find words that wouldn't come. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from when he was little and had been caught in a lie. "It's not what it looks like," Marcus finally said. "Then what is it?" Janet demanded. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like both of you have been using my sister's identity and address to scam credit card companies." Kevin finally found his voice. "It started small. We just needed to establish some credit history, you know? And Marcus said his mom had great credit, so we figured if we just borrowed it for a little while." "Borrowed it?" Sarah's voice rose. "You can't borrow someone's identity, Kevin. That's called stealing." Marcus slumped against the wall, all his earlier bravado gone. "We were going to pay everything back. We never meant for it to get this big." "How big is it, Marcus?" I asked quietly. He wouldn't look at me. "I don't know exactly." "Guess." "Maybe 15,000? 20? Janet made a sound like she'd been punched. $20,000? Across multiple cards. Kevin added quickly, as if that somehow made it better. "And we've been making minimum payments on most of them." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Most of them?" Marcus finally met my eyes, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Not just guilt or shame, but a kind of desperate panic that told me we hadn't reached the bottom of this yet. "There might be a few that we fell behind on," he admitted. "Define fell behind," Sarah said. Kevin and Marcus exchanged another look, and I realized that whatever they were about to tell me was going to be worse than anything I'd already discovered. Marcus was quiet for so long that I could hear the kitchen clock ticking. Finally, he looked up at me with the same expression he'd worn at 8 years old when he broke Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball. Some of them went to collections, he said quietly. Collections? I repeated the word like it was foreign. They started calling the house, Kevin added. That's actually how we figured out you might find out. The calls kept coming. I stared at both of them. The calls I've been getting? The ones where nobody speaks when I answer? Marcus nodded miserably. We told them we'd moved, gave them Kevin's cell number instead, but some of them kept calling the original number on file. Sarah was pacing now, her footsteps sharp against the hardwood floor. So, let me understand this. You two opened credit cards using my sister's identity and address, ran up $20,000 in debt, stopped paying some of the bills, and now debt collectors are harassing her at home. When you put it like that, it sounds really bad, Kevin said weakly. That's because it is really bad, Sarah snapped. This isn't some college prank that got out of hand. This is serious fraud. I sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, the weight of everything finally hitting me. Marcus, how long has this been going on? About 2 years. 2 years. I looked at my son, this young man I thought I knew, and felt like I was seeing a stranger. 2 years you've been lying to me, every day. Mom, I'm sorry. I know it was wrong, but we got in over our heads and didn't know how to stop it. Sarah stopped pacing and turned to face us. What do you mean you didn't know how to stop it? You stop using the cards, you get jobs and pay them off. It's not complicated. Kevin shifted uncomfortably. It's not that simple when you're already behind. The interest rates are insane, and the late fees just keep piling up. So your solution was to open more cards? I asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. I felt something break inside my chest, a sharp crack that had nothing to do with the money and everything to do with trust. How many more, Marcus? Mom, how many more cards are there that I don't know about? Marcus and Kevin exchanged another look, and I realized we still hadn't hit bottom, not even close. Maybe we should sit down and make a list? Kevin suggested quietly. Sarah let out a harsh laugh. A list? How long is this list going to be? I honestly don't remember all of them, Marcus admitted. We applied for so many, and some got rejected, and some we only used once or twice. I put my head in my hands, trying to process what he was telling me. You don't even remember how many fraudulent accounts you opened in my name? We kept most of the paperwork, Kevin offered. It's back at the apartment. What apartment? Sarah asked sharply. I thought you were living in the dorms. Marcus's face went pale. About that? I looked up at him, a new dread settling in my stomach. Marcus, where are you living? We got an apartment off campus last semester. It was cheaper than the dorms, and we figured we could use the extra money for other things. What other things? I asked, though I was starting to suspect I didn't want to know. Kevin cleared his throat. Well, we needed furniture, and Kevin needed a car to get to his job, and then there were some unexpected expenses. You bought a car with my stolen credit? My voice came out as barely a whisper. It's not stolen exactly, Marcus said quickly. You're my mom. It's like family money. Sarah made a sound I'd never heard from her before, something between a gasp and a growl. Family money? Marcus, that's not how family works. That's not how money works. That's not how anything works. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I need to see everything, every card, every statement, every bill. I need to know exactly how deep this goes. Mom, maybe we should talk about this first. No. My voice was steadier now, anger replacing shock. We're past talking. I need to see exactly what you've done to my credit, my finances, my life. Marcus looked like he might cry. It's going to look really bad when you see it all together. Worse than $20,000 in fraudulent debt? Kevin and Marcus exchanged yet another look, and I felt my heart sink even further. The $20,000 was just the cards we remembered off the top of our heads, Kevin said quietly. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. I could hear the clock ticking on the kitchen wall, could hear Sarah's sharp breathing beside me, could see Marcus shrinking smaller with each passing second. How much more? I asked, my voice barely audible. Kevin pulled out his phone and started scrolling through what looked like a notes app. We kept track of everything. We're not completely irresponsible. You're not completely irresponsible? Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief. Kevin, you helped my nephew commit identity theft against his own mother. What part of that strikes you as responsible? I know how it sounds, Kevin said defensively. But we always planned to pay it back. We weren't just throwing money around for no reason. Then what reason? I demanded. What could possibly justify this? Marcus finally looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. The apartment was more expensive than we thought. And then Kevin's financial aid got messed up, so he couldn't make his portion of rent, and my meal plan ran out faster than expected. So you ate on my credit cards? Just sometimes, when we were really broke. Sarah stood up and began pacing behind her chair. Marcus, do you understand that your mother has been eating ramen noodles for dinner 3 nights a week, trying to stretch her budget? What? Marcus looked genuinely shocked. She's been skipping meals, Marcus. Skipping meals so she could send you money for school while you were secretly stealing from her. Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We didn't know that. You didn't ask, Sarah shot back. You didn't ask because you didn't want to know. It was easier to just take what you wanted. I felt something cold settle in my chest as I watched my son process this information. Marcus, tell me about the car. It's not a nice car, he said quickly. It's just a used Honda. Kevin needed it to get to work. How much? $12,000. But we got financing, so it's not like we paid all at once. Financing in my name? Marcus nodded miserably. I did quick math in my head and felt dizzy. So, we're talking about more than $30,000 in total debt. Mom, it sounds worse when you add it all up like that. It is worse when you add it all up like that, Sarah exploded. Marcus, that's more than your mother makes in half a year. Kevin looked up from his phone. Actually, if we're being completely honest, it's closer to $42,000 when you include the furniture and the security deposits and some of the other stuff. The room went completely silent. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. $42,000, I repeated slowly. But a lot of that is stuff with value, Marcus said desperately. The car, the furniture. It's not like we just burned the money. Marcus. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Do you understand what you've done to my credit score? Do you understand that I'll never qualify for a mortgage now? Never be able to get a car loan or even rent a decent apartment? We can sell the car, Kevin offered. It's probably still worth $8,000 or $9,000. So I'd still be out $30-something thousand for furniture and food and God knows what else. Sarah sat back down heavily. What else is there? You said furniture and security deposits and other stuff? What other stuff? Marcus and Kevin looked at each other again, and I wanted to scream at them to stop having these silent conversations. There was Kevin's laptop for school, Marcus said, and we had to pay some fees to get transcripts transferred. And there were some medical bills when Kevin sprained his ankle and didn't have insurance. Medical bills in my name? We used one of the cards that had your insurance information attached, Kevin admitted. Sarah put her head in her hands. This just keeps getting worse. I stared at my son, trying to find some trace of the boy I'd raised. Marcus, when did you become someone who could do this to me? I'm still me, Mom. I just got in over my head. No, you're not still you. The Marcus I raised would have called me crying before he'd ever forge my signature on a credit application. The Marcus I raised would have come home and eaten peanut butter sandwiches before he'd steal from his own mother. Marcus started crying then. Real tears that made him look younger than his 19 years. I wanted to call you. So many times I wanted to call you. But you didn't. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I thought if I could just get through this semester, I could get a better job over the summer and start paying everything back. With what money, Marcus? You've been living beyond your means for months. What made you think you could suddenly start paying back $40,000? I don't know. He sobbed. I wasn't thinking clearly. Kevin reached over and put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, and I felt a flash of anger at the gesture. Don't comfort him right now, Kevin. You're just as responsible for this mess as he is. Kevin pulled his hand back. I know. I'm sorry. I should have stopped him when it started getting out of hand. You should have stopped him before it started, Sarah said firmly. The first time he suggested using his mother's information, you should have said no. I did say no at first, Kevin said quietly. But then we were going to get evicted, and Marcus said it would just be one time, just enough to cover rent until his next student aid check came in. And then what happened? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The student aid check was smaller than we expected, Marcus said, so we had to use the card again, and then again. And it got easier each time, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. I know that makes me a terrible person. It makes you a person who made terrible choices, I corrected. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money. You've broken something between us that might not be fixable. Don't say that, Mom. I'm saying it because it's true. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And without trust, I don't know what kind of relationship we can have. Kevin cleared his throat. What if we came up with a payment plan? I could drop out for a semester, get a full-time job? Kevin, even if you made $15 an hour and worked full-time, it would take you more than a year just to pay back the money, and that's before taxes and living expenses. Then we'll figure something else out, Marcus said desperately. We'll sell everything. We'll get jobs. We'll do whatever it takes. I looked at my son and felt my heart breaking all over again. Not because of the money, but because I could see that he still didn't understand. He thought this was a problem that could be solved with good intentions and hard work. Marcus, while you're figuring out how to pay me back, collectors are going to start calling. My credit is already ruined. I could lose my apartment. I could lose my job if they do a credit check. Your job does credit checks? Sarah asked. They do random ones sometimes, especially for people who handle money. I turned back to Marcus. So, while you're working on your payment plan, I might be homeless and unemployed? Does that help you understand the urgency of this situation? Marcus looked like I'd slapped him. I didn't think about that. You haven't thought about any of this from my perspective. Not once. Kevin pulled out his phone again. What if we called the credit card companies and explained what happened? Maybe they'd work with us. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. Kevin, what Marcus did is called fraud. The credit card companies don't work with people who commit fraud. They prosecute them. The word hung in the air between us like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Prosecute? Marcus whispered. Yes, Marcus. Prosecute. I watched his face crumble as the reality finally began to sink in. Identity theft is a federal crime. It doesn't matter that you're my son. Kevin looked between Marcus and me, his face pale. But you wouldn't actually press charges against him, would you? I might not have a choice, I said. The credit card companies might press charges themselves once they investigate. And Marcus, when they do investigate, they're going to find out about Kevin too. Kevin's phone slipped from his hands and clattered on the coffee table. What do you mean? Sarah leaned forward. Kevin, you used those cards too. You knew they weren't Marcus's cards. That makes you an accessory. But I didn't know they were his mom's cards at first. Kevin protested, looking at Marcus desperately. When did you find out? I asked. Kevin's silence was answer enough. Marcus buried his face in his hands. Kevin found out after the second time we used them. I told him because I was feeling guilty, and I thought maybe he'd help me figure out how to pay it back before you noticed. And instead, you both just kept using them, Sarah said flatly. We were in too deep by then, Kevin said weakly. We figured we'd already messed up so badly that a little more wouldn't matter. I stood up abruptly, needing to move before I said something I'd regret. I walked to the kitchen window and stared out at the parking lot, trying to process what I'd just heard. Mom? Marcus's voice was small behind me. I didn't turn around. So, let me make sure I understand this. You stole my identity, ruined my credit, and put both our futures in jeopardy. And when your friend found out what you were doing, instead of stopping, you both decided to make it worse because you were already in trouble? When you put it like that, it sounds really bad, Marcus said. I spun around to face him. Marcus, it is really bad. There's no other way to put it. Sarah stood up and moved closer to me. Take a breath, she said quietly. You're turning red. I'm turning red because my son just told me that he and his friend made a conscious decision to destroy my life. I snapped. Kevin cleared his throat. We never meant to destroy your life. We just wanted to get through school. Kevin, I'm going to need you to stop talking now, Sarah said sharply. Every time you open your mouth, you make this worse. But I'm just trying to explain. No, I interrupted, walking back to the living room. Kevin, you're trying to justify what you did, and there is no justification for this. Marcus looked up at me with tears in his eyes. So what happens now? Are you going to turn us in? I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. I don't know, Marcus. I honestly don't know. Can we at least try to fix this ourselves first? Marcus asked. Before involving the police? Sarah crossed her arms. And how exactly do you propose to fix this? You owe more money than either of you can make in a year. Your mom's credit is ruined, and every day that passes makes this look more intentional to the authorities. What do you mean, more intentional? Kevin asked. She means that the longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to claim it was just a mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment, I explained. This has been going on for months. You've made dozens of transactions. You've paid minimum payments to keep the accounts active. This looks like a calculated, ongoing fraud. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Are we going to prison? The question hung in the air like smoke. I looked at my son, this young man I'd raised, who was now facing the possibility of a criminal record that would follow him for the rest of his life. I don't know, I said honestly. That might not be up to me anymore. Kevin started crying then, quiet tears that he tried to wipe away with his sleeves. My parents are going to kill me. They've sacrificed everything to help me get through college. And now this. Your parents don't know? Sarah asked. Kevin shook his head. They think I'm doing great. They think the financial aid is covering everything, and I'm just working part-time for spending money. So, you've been lying to them too, I said. I didn't want them to worry, Kevin said defensively. They already work 2 jobs each, just to help with what the financial aid doesn't cover. Marcus wiped his nose. Mom, what if we went to the credit card companies together? What if I confessed, and we worked out a payment plan? Marcus, you're not listening. This isn't about payment plans anymore. This is about the fact that you committed a crime. Multiple crimes. But if we're trying to make it right, it doesn't matter, Sarah interjected. The damage is done. Your mom's credit is destroyed, she's liable for money she didn't spend, and you've created a legal mess that could take years to sort out. I felt something cold settle in my chest as the full implications hit me. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Okay. Is there anything else? Any other accounts? Any other cards? Any other lies? Marcus and Kevin exchanged a look that made my blood run cold. Marcus, I said slowly, what aren't you telling me? Marcus's face went pale, and I watched as he seemed to shrink into himself. The look he'd shared with Kevin wasn't just guilt, it was terror. There's more, Marcus whispered. My hands started to shake. What kind of more? Kevin was staring at the floor now, his shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to disappear. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands, leaving red marks on his cheeks. We didn't just use your information for credit cards, Marcus said, his voice so quiet I had to lean forward to hear him. Sarah sat up straighter. What else? There was a personal loan, Kevin said suddenly, as if he couldn't stand the suspense anymore. And we opened a checking account. The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table so hard my knuckles went white. How much? The loan was for $15,000, Marcus said. $15,000? My voice came out as a croak. We thought we could pay it back before you ever found out, Kevin said desperately. The plan was to use the money to pay for school, graduate faster, get good jobs, and then pay everything back with interest. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. You took out a $15,000 loan in my name without my knowledge? Mom, please? And a checking account? What did you need a checking account for? Marcus's eyes filled with tears again. We needed somewhere to deposit the loan money, and we thought having a checking account would make everything look more legitimate if anyone asked questions. Sarah was shaking her head slowly. This keeps getting worse. Every single thing you're telling us makes this look more premeditated, more calculated. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Kevin said, his voice breaking. We had it all planned out. We were going to graduate in 3 semesters instead of 4, get internships that paid well, and have everything paid back before anyone knew. But that's not what happened, I said, my voice getting louder despite my efforts to stay calm. What happened to the money? Where did $15,000 go? Marcus wiped his nose with his sleeve. Some of it went to tuition and books like we planned. But then we had other expenses, food, rent, gas, and we thought we had more time. Other expenses, I repeated. You mean you were just spending my money on whatever you wanted? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Marcus? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you stole my identity, ruined my credit, put me in debt for tens of thousands of dollars, and spent the money on yourselves. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock on the wall ticking, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Sarah finally spoke. "Is that everything? Please tell me that's everything." Marcus and Kevin looked at each other again, and my heart stopped. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, and his voice was so small I almost couldn't hear him. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sarah reached over and grabbed my hand, her grip tight and reassuring. The kitchen felt like it was closing in around us. "What?" I whispered. "What else?" Marcus was crying openly now, his shoulders shaking. Kevin put his arm around his brother, but he looked just as terrified. "There were credit cards," Marcus said through his tears. "3 of them." The room went completely silent except for the sound of Marcus sobbing. I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. 3 credit cards, in addition to everything else. "How much?" Sarah asked when I couldn't find my voice. "We don't know exactly," Kevin said. "We've been too scared to add it all up." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where these 2 boys had played as children, where they'd built forts and played catch and seemed so innocent. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. "Mom?" Marcus's voice was small behind me. I turned around slowly. "I need you to get every single statement, every piece of paper, every login, everything. Right now. We're going to sit at this table and go through every single transaction." "Okay," Marcus said, wiping his eyes. "Okay, we can do that." "And I need you to understand something," I continued, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "This isn't just about the money anymore. You've destroyed my credit. Do you understand what that means? I can't buy a house. I can't get a loan. I can't even rent an apartment in some places." Kevin's face crumpled. "We didn't think about that part." "Of course you didn't," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "You were thinking like children playing with Monopoly money." "Sarah," I said gently. I appreciated her anger on my behalf, but I needed to handle this. "No," she said, standing up. "They need to hear this. You raised these boys by yourself. You worked 2 jobs to put them through school. You sacrificed everything for them, and this is how they repay you?" Marcus was sobbing again. We know we messed up. We know we hurt Mom. We don't know how to fix it." I walked back to the table and sat down. "Here's how we're going to fix it. First, you're going to get me every single piece of information about what you've done. Every account, every card, every transaction. Then we're going to figure out exactly how much damage we're dealing with." "What about school?" Kevin asked quietly. "What about it?" "We're supposed to register for next semester in 2 weeks." I looked at him for a long moment. "Kevin, you used my identity to commit fraud. You think you're worried about registering for classes?" The weight of that seemed to hit him for the first time. "Are you going to press charges?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Sarah was watching me carefully. Marcus had stopped crying and was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what I'm going to do. Right now, I need information. I need to understand exactly what my life looks like because of what you've done." Marcus nodded quickly. "We'll get everything, all of it. We'll help you figure it out." "You'll do more than help me figure it out," I said. "You'll help me fix it. Both of you are getting jobs. Real jobs. Not work study, not internships. Jobs that pay actual money. And every single penny you make is going toward paying this back." "What if it takes years?" Kevin asked. Then it takes years, Sarah said firmly. You made this mess, you clean it up. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. Go get the paperwork, all of it. We're going to be here all night. After the boys left the room, Sarah moved her chair closer to mine. How are you holding up? I don't know, I said. I keep thinking this is a nightmare and I'm going to wake up. You're stronger than you know, she said. And you don't have to handle this alone. I looked at my best friend, the woman who had been there through everything, and felt a rush of gratitude. Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? Marcus and Kevin returned with a shoebox full of papers and Kevin's laptop. As they started spreading everything across the table, I took a deep breath and prepared myself for what we were about to discover. Whatever came next, we would face it together. And somehow, we would find a way through this mess